Welcome everybody to tonight's weigh-in!
This film begins with Wes Baylor, the strongest MMA fighter in America. In the first round, Baylor is able to lock Johnny up. But in the second round, Johnny gets up and beats Baylor to a pulp. His trainer suggests that Baylor knock Johnny out so that the match will be over. Heeding his coach's advice, he immediately put all his energy and skill into it. And thanks to his punches and kicks, Baylor managed to knock Johnny out, followed by the cheers of the crowd. But unfortunately, Johnny never regained consciousness until he was finally declared dead while being taken to the hospital. Seeing his best friend die, Baylor felt very guilty. He had been through a lot with Joni, and now he could only remember her by memory. Six months after Johnny's death, Baylor chose to retire and exile himself to Thailand. Even though it had been 6 months, he was still haunted by guilt over the death of his best friend. Even to try to forget the incident, he regularly took sedatives and also drank alcohol every day. Actually, Baylor wanted to stop fighting. However, because of the cost of living, he couldn't help but take part in illegal fights in Thailand. Even though Baylor spends his free time drinking every day, he always wins the fight. Over time, he began to fight in front of the elite who invited him to compete on the roof of a luxury hotel, where the audience consisted of tycoons. In the audience, a tycoon named Jonah Aldrich came with his bodyguard Madden. Aldrich was very impressed when he saw Baylor win the match by attacking his opponent brutally. After the match, Baylor, who was engrossed in staring at the city lights from the hotel roof, was suddenly approached by Aldrich. Aldrich felt Baylor wasted his talent by only fighting for a low fee. So, he offered Baylor $1 million for a private one-off match in Myanmar. Even more surprising, Baylor will immediately receive a portion of the fee before the match starts, and the rest will be paid after the fight is over. Aldrich persuades Baylor to accept the offer, saying if Baylor wins the fight, he will not have to fight again for the rest of his life. Before leaving, Aldrich told Madden to give Baylor his business card.
Madden, give Mr. Baylor our particulars.
After much thought, Baylor finally came to Aldrich's office in Bangkok. There, Baylor asks Aldrich to pay him double. Without hesitation, Aldrich agreed to Baylor's offer. The next day, Baylor flies with Aldrich in a helicopter and descends into a forest, where they are greeted with a military ceremony by a local general. Aldrich also paid tribute to the general. Later, Baylor was introduced to several people. First, a tycoon who is also a matador, Esparto. Second, Jacob Zimling and his son, Tobias Zimling. Jacob turns out to be an admirer of Baylor because Tobias often watches Baylor's matches while competing in MMA. Third, a man who claims to work as a game programmer, Landon Marshall. And lastly is Sophia, the daughter of the oil tycoon who is the third richest person in the world. After that, Baylor asked Aldrich where his fighting ring was. Aldrich explained that the battle ring was a 260 square kilometers forest that was in front of them, and Baylor's opponents were people he had just been introduced to. Baylor's opponents will try to hunt him down and kill him. Baylor is declared victorious if he manages to reach the border safely. Hearing this information, Baylor was confused. He couldn't imagine what kind of battle he would face. Even if Aldrich kept his promise by giving Baylor part of his payment in a form of ruby, it still didn't calm him down. The hunting team then began to warm up. They pulled 2 captives out of a car and hunted them down. With the rifles they used, the prisoner was shot dead. Aldrich explains that they are a group of tycoons who like hunting, and soon Baylor will be their target. Then, Aldrich gave Baylor an empty water bottle. Baylor was given 2 minutes to quickly run before the hunt began. However, Baylor was not willing to get involved in the hunt. He intends to cancel all agreements and return to Thailand. Unfortunately, the troops under the general's command had surrounded Baylor. Once Baylor changed his mind, they would not hesitate to shoot Baylor dead. Having no other choice, Baylor ran towards the forest. The hunt has now begun. The hunter team started marching into the forest to hunt down Baylor. In the middle of the forest, one of them intends to separate himself to hunt down Baylor alone. The man who broke away from the group was named Maduka. Not long after, Maduka is able to find Baylor and prepares to shoot him with a sniper rifle. However, Baylor was able to avoid the shot by swimming into the waterfall. Then he reappeared and attacked Maduka to death. Not long after, the hunters arrived at that location and saw Maduka's body. They were very excited because they had found the right person to hunt for. The hunters did not know that Marshall, who was part of the hunting team, actually recorded everything he saw with a recording device hidden in his pants. The group was finally able to find Baylor. One by one, the hunting team started shooting at Baylor. Luckily, Baylor was able to dodge their attacks and fled into the forest. In the middle of the forest, Baylor met a herd of elephants who were resting. Then a village woman named the appears. Suspicious, he accuses them of being one of the hunters who attacked him. They explained that she was just a village woman who had lived in the forest. She knows the ins and outs of the forest and invites Baylor to come with her to reach the border. On the way, they told that she was looking for her older brother, Win, who had been a target in hunting in the forest. In the past, the general expelled the residents who lived in the forest. However, residents who are reluctant to go are made targets for conglomerates. After the villagers were killed, they made them prisoners in prison as prey targets. Now, it turns out the tycoons are sending fighters like Baylor as their targets.
When someone in our village disappears, we know they've been used in a game.
Back to Aldrich, who now asked the general to send several motorbikes to make it easier for them to catch up with Baylor. Aldrich flies a drone to look for Baylor's whereabouts. From the camera mounted on the drone, Aldrich found Baylor walking in the woods with a woman. Aldrich also told the other hunters that the target for their bounty was now 2 people. The hunters then used motorbikes to chase Baylor. Quickly, they were able to find Baylor, who was in a clearing. While protecting Baylor attacks the motorbikes and manages to overthrow 2 hunters. One of the hunters, Sophia, continues to chase Baylor and shoots from her motorbike. Baylor took a motorbike to avoid Sophia's pursuit and stopped at a cabin. There, Baylor and Sophia fight one-on-one. Sophia uses 2 knives to attack Baylor. Baylor can overthrow Sophia easily. But instead of killing Sophia, Baylor immediately got on his motorbike and tried to save who was captured by Jacob and Tobias. Jacob attempts to attack and rape the. At this moment, Tobias immediately left. He was reluctant to see what Jacob was doing, especially since Tobias basically didn't like violence. When Baylor arrived, he was surprised to find that they had managed to kill Jacob. Baylor immediately brought them to continue their journey. The group of hunters finally found Jacob's body. Aldrich blames Tobias for leaving his father alone. It turns out that Jacob paid a lot of money to participate in this hunt so that Tobias can be brave. After that, Aldrich was able to track down Baylor's whereabouts because it turned out that he had installed a GPS on the Ruby. He gave to Baylor. He and his team of hunters rushed to where Baylor was, where Aldrich saw Baylor entering a minefield. He asked the hunters to just wait until Baylor stepped on one of the mines embedded in the area. However, Tobias wants to avenge Jacob's death. He took his rifle and recklessly ran into the minefield. When Baylor shoots him, Tobias accidentally steps on a mine, and he is killed by the explosion. Baylor and them managed to escape from the minefield. In the evening, that takes Baylor to a cave she used frequently with Wynn. Though was so surprised when she entered the cave, it turned out that Wynn is there. They immediately ran to hug Wynn. It was getting late. Finally, they decided to spend the night in the cave. In an area not far from the cave, the hunters also set up tents for the night. The next morning, when Baylor woke up, he found himself left alone in the cave. Wynn had left the cave with the ruby. Baylor immediately ran and tried to catch them. From a distance, he saw Wynn had been caught by the hunters tied up. Baylor crept closer to the hunters. He approached Marshall, who was standing some distance from the group, while recording a video of the hunters torturing the Wynn. With a swift movement, Baylor took Marshall's gun tucked in his trouser pocket and pointed it at Marshall's head. Then he brought Marshall before the hunters. Baylor asked Aldrich to trade Marshall for the Wynn. The hunters eventually released the Wynn, though they remained vigilant by pointing a gun at Baylor and walking toward him. Baylor, still holding Marshall hostage, tells the Wynn to leave first. The Wynn immediately ran into the middle of the forest, leaving Baylor alone.
I'll hold him off and then...
On the way, they run into Sophia, who is pointing a gun at them. Here, the pushes went into the river. She was determined to face Sophia alone. In that fight, initially Sophia was able to launch a crushing attack on his body with her punches and kicks. However, the situation begins to turn in his favor, and she is finally able to kill Sophia. Back to Baylor, where he was getting more and more cornered. Although he was still holding Marshall hostage, Aldrich and the other two hunters continued to walk towards him, holding their guns. Finally, as their distance grew closer, Baylor attacked Madden and shot Aldrich simultaneously. After that, Baylor escaped by jumping into the river. He walked down the river where he finally met the Wynn. At the river, holding a tree, they returned Baylor's ruby. They explained that she had previously intended to give the ruby to the general on the condition that the village be returned and Baylor released from the hunters. On the other hand, Baylor managed to steal Marshall's camera. Baylor threw away the camera after removing the memory card inside. In the afternoon, the camera that Baylor threw away is found by men. He shows the camera to Aldrich, who is furious when he finds out Marshall has recorded their hunt. Even worse, now the camera's memory card has been stolen by Baylor. Marshall defended himself by explaining that he was a video game programmer, not a hunter like them. He took part in the hunting event and recorded it to be used as material for the video game graphics he was going to make. Annoyed by Marshall's stupidity, Aldrich grabbed Marshall's neck. With Marshall dead, there are only 3 hunters left: Aldrich, Madden, and Esparto. Overwhelmed with Baylor as his target, Aldrich took the initiative to contact the cleaning team. The cleaning team is the general's subordinate soldiers who will assist him in hunting down Baylor. Baylor, and Wynn are seen almost reaching the border. However, Aldrich and the other 2 hunters managed to catch up with them in a jeep. Baylor, who saw it from a distance, began to suspect how Aldrich could always know the location of their hideout. Until finally, he found a GPS among the rubies he was carrying. Baylor then devises a plan to trap Aldrich with the GPS. After that, he handed the ruby and memory card to this so that all crimes related to the hunting event could be exposed. After that, Baylor, Wynn split up. Baylor gets on a boat and heads down the river, where he shoots the oil tank near Aldrich's car. Now Baylor is being chased not only by the 3 hunters, but also by the soldiers. Meanwhile, the N-Wing cross paths with Esparto. The fight between them was unavoidable. The N-Wing gang up on Esparto, and with all their might they finally managed to defeat Esparto. When Baylor arrives at the border, he sees Aldrich and Madden pointing their guns at the locals. Baylor hid behind a pile of wood on the bridge. However, when Aldrich threatens to kill a boy, Baylor is forced to come out of hiding. Aldrich then asks Baylor to hand over the memory card he stole. However, Baylor said that he had swallowed the memory card. Aldrich orders 5 local thugs to gang up on Baylor. Aldrich was seen enjoying the hand-to-hand combat between Baylor and the 5 thugs. However, the 5 thugs were defeated by Baylor, so Madden had to duel with Baylor. Seeing Madden getting pressed, Aldrich took a gun to shoot Baylor. However, Aldrich shot Hitmen instead and killed him instantly. Then, Baylor dueled with Aldrich and attacked him repeatedly. When Baylor took Aldrich's gun and told him to run to be hunted, suddenly an army of soldiers came to surround Baylor. Luckily, the shows up. She handed the ruby to the general and asked him to return her village. Unexpectedly, the general agreed and allowed Baylor to leave. Aldrich, of course, did not want to accept the general's decision. He then grabbed the general's gun and pointed it at Baylor. However, the general's men reacted more quickly. They shot Aldrich until he died. At the end, Baylor and them marry and establish a martial arts college, while the general is said to have been punished for all his evil deeds. The film ends.